Okay, the time is now 4:30 PM, May 6, 2025. I call to order this meeting of the Budget, Finance, and Administration Committee. We'll begin with a moment of silence. Mr. Root, would you pray for us?
Yes, sir. Pray with me if you'd like to. Oh, dearest Father, thank you for your uncountable number of blessings. Minute by minute, you keep us alive and sustain us and provide resources for us and for this county. And so in this budget meeting, we pray that council would be guided by your wisdom, just your love and your perception on how to use those resources to best benefit the community, to be good stewards of the funds entrusted to the county. In your name I pray. Amen.
Ms. Herbert, would you lead us in prayer?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we have approval of April 29th, 2025 special meeting minutes. Second. Motion second. Any discussion, any changes? Hearing none, all in favor? Now we have discussion item. We're going to continue discussion of fiscal year 2025-2026 budget discussions and review. Ms. Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Budget Finance Committee Administration meeting. Back front and center, we're going to pick up where we left off on the fee schedule. I had a couple of conversations with council members and a follow-up to delinquent tax fees. Those are now appropriately reflected.
Murphy, what
In your
page
book,
are
I'm
you
sorry, it's under the fee tab.
I see it.
I've had coffee this afternoon. I had a cup of coffee. Fee schedule. And those pages aren't numbered, it's closer to the front, I think. Let's see, right here. Are your fees, the fee schedule's not there? Mr. Hart's is blank. Ma'am, everybody else have fees?
I have it.
Thank you so much. Here we go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Looks like we got some sun. It's too nice to be in here, isn't it? Again, I'm not gonna go over every single one that we went over during the last budget meeting. But, Mr. Mize, I believe you had a question regarding the delinquent tax fees. Those are now clear in the fee schedule and lists what those are for. There had been a notion, at least by one council member, for us to consider increasing the first cost to $25 and the fourth cost to $150, making them incrementally increase over the process period for the delinquent tax notices. If there's an appetite for that or anybody wants to discuss, happy to do so.
Good.
So we do want to increase or do not?
I'm in favor of it.
What do you? My only concern is if somebody's not paying their taxes, then they're already in the hole. And I think we should cover the fees, the cost that it takes to chase that money down. But I don't believe in being punitive on somebody already in a hole. But if it costs us more, I know costs went up, if it's costing us more to do those tasks, then I will support increasing.
In that event, for equitability, so to speak, for the first cost, it really should be about $12, the cost for us to process. In which case, the $40 for the fourth cost, in reality, just for the termination process, closing out of documentation, getting everything ready for tax sale, Instead of 150, I'd recommend 50.
I'll be good with that.
And that doesn't put us in a place where we're quote unquote making money, it's that we're not losing money while processing for these services. And, you know, I mean, Mr. Durham, we're very fortunate that we have such a high percentage of tax collection countywide. I don't know if you remember when we were doing our bond and agency rating, our tax collection rate is above 98%. A lot of the properties we do see come delinquent are not necessarily the property owner themselves. It could be like a complicated family issue where there isn't an identifiable owner, or there may be voluntary for HOA fees. I'm not gonna name the neighborhood. With that, moving on down, same page, and nothing on here is red yet. The library, which is the next department down. We were laughing about this, it's not funny. 10 cents for an overdue book. I believe it's been since the 1980s or 90s maybe. So we are recommending an increase there to 25 cents for
You have a lot of that?
late fees. Sir?
You have a lot of people.
We do and we don't. We have, it comes in spurts. It costs us more money to make change for 10 cents than it does for us to charge 25 cents, if that makes any sense. The amount of processing we have to do just to make sure we have adequate change to give you 90 cents from your $1 bill. Now, of course, most people, if it's one day late, the library does have a little bit of leniency in what they charge, but lost books is based on that or the replacement cost of the book. 25 cents. Okay. And then this one was brought by a council member just today for the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, the $3 daily parking for resident and non-resident, and daily parking for boats and trailers. The daily parking rate was recommended to go to $5, and that's per vehicle, not per person. And then the boat and trailer parking was recommended to go to $10.
So it's still free for veterans and people over 65?
Yes. And county employees.
And county.
Now, not county employees' families. So I can't go rent a minivan and bring 45 people to the park. But I can come in to the park with my county ID. As can each of you. I know none of you are over 65.
I'm just Let's see, Glenn, Don?
I'll get in free.
And that's all on the fee schedule side. If y'all had any further questions about those.
Is there in-county, out-of-county rate, or no?
No, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm glad you brought that up. I completely overlooked my last note. There was a recommended change for out-of-county camping, waterfront and non-waterfront. Currently, non-resident is 25 a night. There was a recommendation to go to 30, and waterfront non-resident to go to 40. That would be a $5 and $10 increase per night, per non-resident, per type of site respectively.
How do we enforce that? Do you have to show your driver's license?
And credit card. Most of these are booked
And
online
the
now.
campers are supposed to be tagged also.
Yes,
So it was showing out of state or whatever.
yes. And again, this is just allowing for increased usage for residents.
Because it's pretty hard to get a spot, right?
There are times it's impossible, yes. Okay. And then moving on from there, we're gonna get into the just general fund portion, and this is the next hard paper copy tab. I'm not gonna go through department by department unless you have a specific question or a specific department you'd like to discuss. I do wanna go over just some highlights of the general fund. The primary focus, as for the third year in a row, has been an increase in public safety. Keeping the special millages for roads and capital projects. We do have extra overtime booked this year for law enforcement. That's one area where we went over budget during current year and a little over budget last year. It doesn't mean we were in the red as a whole. It just means that we have law enforcement officers that have to stay on and fire and emergency services personnel that has to stay on. So, for instance, if I'm a firefighter and I'm at a fire and my shift ends at 7 and the fire's burning at 7:01, it's not very likely I'm leaving. Same exact incidents with law enforcement. Yes, Mr. Hart?
I don't know where you've added something to the administrator, but 4 years ago, it was 50,000, now it's twice that.
So the adding to the administrator over the years, Mr. Hart, one has been all the comp and wage stuff over the years. Now, those go out to other departments, if you'll look down and see. You'll also see in the top portion, just for the salaries, there's an added grants position that was moved from the finance office and the added risk manager position that is moved from the HR office.
We talked about it one time about adding an assistant administrator or something similar.
Yes, sir.
Have we accounted for that in the budget?
I have not. 21, that's on page 21. I have not included that in the budget. This is a very tight and very balanced budget. It's balanced to the penny. If I could arrange to have one of those, I would, but I feel like it's more important for us to provide for the public safety measures. The law enforcement officer, we're able to fund out of the A-tax and to convert the temporary firefighters that are currently at Holly Springs to the West Union Division. Now, should millage look different in September, or there be a change in a FELO agreement or anything like that, and there is availability of funds for that, happily bring it back. I would love to have some help. So, Mr. Hart, if you look, again, on the administrator's page, you know, if you look at there's 3 rows that are highlighted there. The top row is the one where you see the most significant increase, and that's in the salaries, and that's in the change in the 2 positions. And do you have further questions? I don't want to assume
No,
to move on.
ma'am, that's fine.
Okay, I didn't want to make the assumption to move on.
No, that's fine. I just wondered, I knew there had to be something added.
I mean, there's also contingency in there. There's also contingency funds in there. That's not in
Yes,
there every month.
and those contingency funds and professional services, you know, you'll see in calendar year 23, or fiscal year 23 and 24, the professional funding was high, but it's gone back down to 100,000. And the contingency funds, we must keep at a certain funding level, because those are the funds that are quote-unquote, not the budgeted funds, but those are for the unforeseens. For instance, when we were issued the requirement to put the bar screen in, we did not fund the engineering for that. So there's $30,000 that was available to send to the detention center for the engineering for the bar screen, because we were under consent order, you know, the bar screen at the jail from the sewer authority, the contingency funds. And actually, I'd love to provide a whole report on how we use contingency funds from time to time, because usually it's something that you think would be made up. For instance, we had a rodent problem. You know, we don't budget for rodent issues. We had a chipmunk or squirrel get into a county vehicle and chew all the wires up, and they have to be fixed and replaced. You don't typically budget for those sorts of things, but I think the squirrels and chipmunks around Pine Street are extra feisty on the weekends because we're not here. It's like, you know, cats away, mice will play.
We feed them.
Well, there's nothing but oak trees here. I don't know why we're on Pine Street. This whole place is nothing but oak trees, and they're pretty oak trees. Per our last budget meeting, we did include funding for the airport grant. Again, that was that $6.4 million project for the airport. That is included in this budget. We are including the language for the accountability for the nonprofits to treat them like grants, so that there's a closeout to those if it's project specific. Again, funding for a corporal position. He's gonna be joining the Lake, he or she, I should say, is going to be joining the Lake Patrol. In the off times, that corporal position can provide at any time regular law enforcement duties within the county, and the sheriff and field have worked very hard together to make that happen. Detention center is the single largest increase in the general fund budget, and those are unavoidable. Both inmate healthcare and inmate food went out for bid this year. Both were higher than we anticipated simply because the cost of doing business at detention centers, those are unavoidable. The rest of the departmental budgets, we did send out an email asking if they could, not should, not shall, if they could cut 5 to 8%. Several departments did that. Several departments can't. For instance, delinquent tax. That's a set fee for a set number of services. HR, set fee for a set type of service. Larger departments were very, very responsive in doing so. Again, no tax increase. We did include a 2.25% cost of living across the board, which includes elected officials, unless the law specifies otherwise. The law does specify for magistrate judges, probate judge. I think that's it this year. And it does exclude y'all. Cat adoption fees. Sheriff Crenshaw texted this morning. I told him it was in the proviso that we made the amendment for May 20th meeting, because the adoption fees being changed out for all adoption fees going directly to the Humane Society. That resulted from our last meeting as well. The council priorities being addressed, just off the top of the list here. Cost of living, check. Golden Corner Commerce Park, check. We're on the way with that. Economic Development Special Millage, we are working through the process now of figuring out whether we're getting FEMA funds or insurance funding for the damage done to the retention pond and the property adjacent to Golden Corner. The Golden Corner is being viewed and is being shown right now. Exit 4 sewer, waiting on DHEC to give me a go, and honestly, I believe it might call for a special council meeting if we get that approval for us to get that authority to move on. I'm working with Roads and Bridges right now to do the county paving crews for road improvements to bring all of those improvements back in-house. I don't have an estimate for that yet because it looks like we should buy the equipment on the front side and then start transitioning some staff on the back side. That way we're not having a whole lot of staff without equipment to operate. Quarry production, they actually had a couple of issues at the quarry today. We are, as y'all approved 2 meetings ago, going through the study for the land acquisition for that. Capital improvement plan, much to our dismay, is gonna be a big mouthful to bite off, but I think we can get it at least started and ready to roll for us to start looking into by the fall. The health department, for the vacating of records for the upstairs component. Dr. Gimbel has said that Clemson has not authorized any expansion of their service yet. I didn't want to move the records twice. Once he lets me know anything that he is authorized to do, we'll start that process there. Sewer planning underway, emergency services expansion. The timing of the 76th bridge over the Chaga River being washed out forced us to put firemen in that Holly Springs station, which allows for now for us to convert those into full-time firefighters and not temporary firefighters. Solid waste planning, Swain and Amy are here. We have compactor units and vehicles within these capital millages in the back of the book here, and Pine Street Security. Because this budget begins July 1, there'll be some greater implementations, but we're taking some baby steps inside the building now. Again, you have a balanced budget. I know that you've all been through this. I've spoken with a couple of you multiple times today. I appreciate knowing that you spend your time and effort making sure that what you're looking at is what you want to see in a budget and what you believe that we should be providing in this budget and the services associated with. If y'all want to go through any of the capital millage funds, happy to do that too.
Which one?
Any of the capital or special funds. On some of those, just a notation for anybody watching or members of the public, on some of the funds, let's look specifically like capital vehicle fund. We don't typically start funding, making expenditures out of that fund until tax millage starts rolling in, which is why you'll see the purchase of X number of vehicles. State contracts don't come out until well into the fall. We don't know the price of vehicles, and the sheriff gets first dibs. So if the sheriff decides, hey, we don't want Tahoes this year, we do want Fords, then sheriff's is gonna get first dibs on those, and then we start distributing those funds to those other departments as needed.
So just like a question, like I'm looking at road maintenance fund,
Yes, sir.
we put 3.1 mils in it.
Yes, sir.
So total revenue is increasing just because we're using some of that fund balance. So it shows as the use of fund balance as new revenue, although it's prior year revenue. Is that-
It is. That's correct. And part of these, that fund balance is, we're beginning to do some more work in-house on those. We've got full staffing now. Again, I do want to say the Evergreen Staffing Study was a godsend to us. We have had so much less turnover. It is nice to have employees that come to work day after day and month after month and year after year because they have experience and they're not starting from scratch every 6 months. Having someone to know to get on a piece of equipment and go get this done is so much better, especially for public works side.
So it looks like we're still, we're working our plans for the future,
Yes, you are. And one of the things that you'll notice in this year's is the ATAX. That was included this year. Normally you would approve your ATAX grant funding twice a year in a regular council meeting. Because the expenditure has become so great and we're doing it twice a year now, we did an annual budget for ATAX because it needs to be approved by council.
Where is that
As
at?
part of our ordinance, 3 readings and a public hearing. Have the page number for your ATAX? 78. Oh, yeah, I got it.
I had put the cheats in, I got those.
You want mine?
No, I got it right here.
Mr. Hart, you want mine?
No.
You want mine? Do you want
No,
mine?
no.
Okay.
I underlined something I tried to find.
So 78 and 79, again, you haven't normally seen these 2 pages in your budget, but because these appropriations should be approved by council via ordinance, they are now included and will be included in our budget ordinances moving forward.
Is that
So-
where is that deputy position, is it captured in there? Or?
Yes.
So I think it's pretty good.
It is. Now, it doesn't say specifically for that, but it's included in.
Under the salaries or.
And keep in mind, those are 2 separate funds. The state, both funds have requirements, so X amount, like X percentage has to go to advertising, X percentage has to go to ABC. 30% state accommodations is required, 65% is required.
So
Only do
30% of state accommodation taxes has to be used for advertising.
Yes. And I have an email from Mr. Shirley that breaks down every single bit of that. I'm happy to
That's
forward
that's
that.
state law, that's not air policy.
No, that's state law.
got a question. I know that that's our job, is to make sure that the public is safe, but, we got $5 million and some odd cents for fire, $3 million for emergency, and $1.5 million for fire emergency, services, vehicles. So that adds up to be about 9 million and a half. Okay. I just wondered if some of this was duplicated.
I don't believe so, Mr. Hart. So for regular fire that comes out of the 10 fund, that's your fire department. That's also inclusive of emergency management, which includes all of your radiological activities. So when we have the biannual drill, all of the Duke, that includes your community medical response, not separate from fire, but it's all in one budget. That is inclusive of the funding for all rescue squads, special dive team, special rescue, hazmat. All of those things are funded within that 9 million that you just brought up. In addition to the county providing air packs to every single station in the county. That's not just county stations. So all those air packs are provided to every volunteer station, which means all 17 districts get those air packs. The vehicle and equipment replacement, those trucks and apparatus, those all go out to volunteer stations as well. So it's a county-wide cost. It is a lot of money. This county is 628 square miles. And, the number of 911 calls coming in for emergencies. And again, they're not all fires, so I don't want it to all be fire money, because they're not all fires. This is typical general emergency response. The other thing is that those, especially the capital vehicle and equipment fund, you have to have a certain amount of money to pay for those. We did a lease purchase on those 6 trucks a few years ago, and we'll be looking at doing a lease purchase again. But for the number of trucks that we have to keep the county ISO a solid 4, which is a benefit to our taxpayers, that we don't have one district paying an ISO of 10 and another paying an ISO of 5. It's equalized across the county, which means all of that equipment and apparatus and radios and air packs, all of those things have to be relatively consistent across the county, even for stations that aren't as busy as others.
I do have a question on page 74. The Bountyland Fire Department is showing only a total amount of support of 15,000 versus 60.
I'm sorry?
On page 74,
Yes, sir?
Bountyland Fire Department's showing 15,000, where everybody else is showing 60,000.
Yes, sir. Bountyland is partially funded from the 10 fund too. We haven't broken out employees to go to the special fund yet. We wanted to make sure that what we were doing was adequate and representative of that fire department. Over time, the funding for that department will increase as their call volume increases and as the number of staff members rotating in and out on shift at that station increases. 15 at this time is an adequate number.
Anybody give any thought, come up with any solutions on the allocation of funds for the volunteer fire departments based on activity or response?
I had the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to go to South Carolina State Fire last Wednesday. This will be my 3rd consecutive year being invited to go to State Fire to discuss all sorts of fire issues. We had 5 different county departments represented last week at Academy, and they also have a state fire chiefs. I did ask one of the fire chiefs that has the State Fire Chiefs Association connections and our fire chief, how is it most equitable? A lot of counties are simply converting. They're either your county station or your volunteer station, and if you're a volunteer station, they do a volunteer style incentive. Some of the counties own all the volunteer stations, which made it very difficult for them to say, well, we're not gonna allocate this to that or this to that. Every single person that we spoke to specifically on this topic, and volunteer decline was a huge topic last week, statewide. Partially because of the training requirements and partially because we don't have families the size of we used to. Most people don't have time the way they used to. every other reason you can imagine, they're all real. But no one that we spoke to, and I handed my card out like I was soliciting business. Hey, if you got a good idea, or if y'all know of a good idea, let us know. There is no real way without it being based on a base amount and a percentage. That would be the most equitable. The cost of running a station that's running a lot of calls is a higher cost than a station that is not running a ton of calls. But then the volunteer incentive portion gets in.
Maybe that's what we do a base amount that's lower than what we give now.
Correct.
And then the rest of the money's in a pot, and you divvy that out based
Yes.
on percentage of.
And our stations are really different because our geographical situation is very different. And I'm not picking on a county anywhere in the state of South Carolina, but I'm just gonna pick Fairfield. It's pretty flat. It looks the same on the eastern side as it does the western side, as it does the southern and northern sides. Oconee County is very diverse. So Salem is gonna run a lot more special rescues than, say, Fairplay. Fairplay is gonna run a lot more I-85 vehicle accidents or tractor trailers being overturned than Townville, or than Holly Springs. So what they're doing is so diverse around the county that I think when we look at a base amount, which I believe I mentioned the last time, $10,000 as a base for each station, or $10,000 twice a year as a base, and then doing a percentage above and beyond. But I will say, the cost of doing a special rescue, county volunteers and county paid staff on special rescue provide backup, where the cost of doing, say, a mile marker 2 tractor trailer cleanup costs a little more because they have to use a chemical extraction or specialized equipment. I mean, you really, really have to almost utilize a FEMA formula. When we have FEMA declared incidents, we have a Form G40 that we fill out, and there's a calculation that goes with what type of equipment, who's on the scene, how much fuel is being used. And on top of that, the volunteer incentive, as good as it is, I don't know of any volunteer that responds to an emergency in the county for money. I don't know one. They go because they're soul driven to go help another person. The volunteer incentive is a good thing, but not one of them go after money.
Just need more of them.
Yes, sir. I love the idea of a recruiting officer.
I think I know we need to do something. Just saying it's a problem and not actively seeking out a solution, it's not gonna fix itself.
No, it's not.
I think it's, some type of combination with the school district and a volunteer officer working with both to drive it up. Because the numbers I ran now, probably 4 years ago, and it's much higher now. My rough estimate's that if all volunteers left, it's about $11.5 million.
I'd have to run those numbers. I don't,
That's 4-year-old numbers, so.
right.
Eventually, that's gonna happen.
Yeah. That's not counting firehouse stuff, because it's all volunteer stations, a lot of them on their building.
And none of the substations were built to be lived in. I mean, literally, they're satellite fire stations, so there would be a construction component required and/or expansion required.
We need, I noticed one thing in the recent search and rescue. One, the Whetstone station next to where I live, there's no signage. But then the other satellite station out Village Creek, volunteers was gonna meet there, we ended up meeting at the community center. It does not show up on any Google map search, nothing. It doesn't exist. And then there's no sign in front of it, so if you drive by, you know it's a fire station.
Right? I'm
May
guessing
not-
when everyone stole someone stole all the rebar from Village Creek, they stole the sign too?
I don't know, but there's not a sign on Whetstone either. For future planning, it'd be nice to have nice signs at these places so you know it's a
Right.
fire department. Not that the man, if you go in there with help, you can get help, but, it was just very confusing in the search and rescue of telling people
That have never been here
to
before.
go to the Village Creek Fire Department, and there's no GPS coordinates or map for it.
I've got a note of that, thank you.
And that may be the case in other stations as well.
A volunteer firemen or fire ladies, or is a generational thing. And as time goes, and the older generations die off, and then the middle generation comes in and they die off, probably that last generation ain't gonna wanna fight fires. So it's gonna be an issue that's gonna have to be tackled later on. Probably not in my lifetime, but somebody's gonna have to tackle it.
Maybe in your lifetime, I think it's coming.
And it's not specific to fire. I've been meeting lately with the Humane Society for us to come to a better understanding of how we could help each other moving forward. And I'm not picking on anybody that volunteers for the Humane Society, but there's no 20-year-old volunteering there either. It's a generational thing, really.
I like the idea Matt brought up about a recruiting person to get into the schools, and hopefully the school would support it. Maybe some sort of pilot type training program.
We had a program at Hamilton Career Center years and years ago, and it was funded in part by the school district.
They
We
get
didn't
out and
have
figure out
enough
how to use
enrollees
fire
to keep it going.
extinguishers, hoses.
I think ideally, if you could, get the training program back in the school, talking with some of our staff, they feel like with what the school district was paying, you couldn't get a qualified trainer. Maybe that's something where we help split that, and other duties on top of is recruiting and volunteer coordinator. You know, people used to could leave their job, we talked about this recently, people used to could leave their jobs, you know,
Yes.
to respond to a fire call, that's not the
Yes.
case anymore. But maybe it's something we can work in the future, fee in lieu of agreements for, you know, community, you know, help and outreach, you know. Some type of program where they could allow employees to be first responders. Obviously, if it's a, you know, if you're a line worker, you know, on a assembly line, you can't just walk off, but there's other, if we could just reignite that sense of duty that wasn't just on individuals, it was on companies too. You know? It's just a-
Maybe we should go into the high schools, because I remember when I was growing up, you know, a lot of people, including me, would go down to the fire station, you know, with the adults there, play basketball or whatever, and all of a sudden, you know, you're washing a fire truck, and you're seeing what's going on. and you
Right,
think, well,
it's
maybe-
catching.
Maybe I wanted to do this, or
Right.
help volunteer or something, and I don't see that happening these days. I don't see people gathering around fire stations and cooking out.
I know when I was in school, there was kids already carrying the radios.
Oh, yeah. And they were the cool kids.
They were the cool kids.
And if they got toned out, you know, some seniors would actually leave the school, let them leave and run calls.
My son's already walking around with a walkie-talkie pretending to be a fireman, so he might be recruited.
Kind of going on a different direction, but I know EMS folks are gonna talk to us tonight. What did we budget this year for the?
1.3 million. Yes, sir.
What did we budget last year?
1.3 million. So we've funded them. We went from 300,000 to 1.3. And Don, I met with him. Was it last Friday? Friday before. We rescheduled, so I can't remember. It was Friday before. This
Friday
past Friday
before.
was prom. But we had met with them as well. They are asking for an increase, of course. I reminded Mr. Combe, and they'll be here tonight to make a presentation, that when we did the $1 million increase, they understood at that time that the county would have difficulty in making a leap or bound from that for probably 3 or 4 year period. We're on year 3 of that. If there were extra funds in here, absolutely, they would be considered for increased funding, but I do believe it's probably a next year thing. There may be, depending on the one-time capital and or capital vehicle, an opportunity throughout the course of the year. Say, I'm gonna pick on Swain, if he had budgeted $25,000 for a compactor unit, for instance, and it comes in at 20, and we ordered 8 of them, there may be a small pocket for a one-time capital expenditure for the ambulance service there. I'd really like for us and them to consider a contract for services, similar to that we do with the municipalities for outside of city limit fire protection.
What other thoughts or concerns?
You'll You'll see the increases in utilities. You'll see increases in maintenance. You do see some increases in buildings, grounds. We're working with the engineers now. We're looking at some one-time capital expenditures for the replacement of the sheriff roof. We've got to replace a roof on 102 Laura Lane, which is the old construction. It's called Foothills Alliance now. Foothills Alliance? Yes, Foothills Alliance. Capital improvement plan has forced us to start taking a look at what we're gonna need to be funding in the future. Now, of course, we're not finished with that, but just collecting all of the data for all of the county-owned facilities has been a task in and of itself. But I believe once we get those documents compiled in a way that we can start doing assessments on each one of the buildings, the one-time capital will be planned out 3 or 4 years in advance.
So we try and, following up on this tariff thing, are we trying to buy things that are manufactured, made, whatever, in the United States, so tariffs won't affect it?
So state law for procurement guidelines hasn't touched tariffs or hasn't made any significant changes. We simply follow state law. South Carolina state law, basically, we're a low bid state unless we do an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications, and then you choose based on a certain set of criteria and not cost. Everything we purchase right now is simply by state law procurement policy. I have a feeling the tariffs will have an impact on some of the materials that will need to be purchased over the next 6-8 months.
We should look at sourcing that in the United States.
If we could, yes. And we can write a preference for that. I think before we decide to source United States or consider doing that we are allowed to do a study, possibly looking at what other counties have bid out and what they paid if they sourced United States versus otherwise. Most of the time, though, goods and materials, other than like air conditioner parts, some vehicle parts, of course, are overseas, but most of the time, normal goods and services for operational purposes are typically made in the United States. Vehicle parts, probably HVAC parts, I think are the two primary that would be out of country or imported. Maybe some uniforms, the source uniforms. Can't think of many other things. Well, I'm lying through my teeth. Let me find out where my pen is made. Japan.
So on a positive note to that, Jamie Gilbert at the OEA manufacturing preference, he said that they're seeing a lot more activity now, a lot more expansion now, people looking to expand. So hopefully we'll see some more reshoring. And if that happens, I think with the space we have, we should be in a good spot.
We are. There's a lot of interest. I don't know if the email he sent me this morning is confidential or not. I don't want to say any company names that he mentioned, but within the last 9 days, we've had more than 11 bites in local economic investment interest. 2 really competitive.
So this was before that, at the meeting, he said at this point last year, we've already had showing more interest than we've had at all of the previous year.
And once the sewer expansion happens to exit 4, the next obvious step would be for us to start courting someone to start looking at them at a company's expense to work on spec building. Existing buildings, because of the speed in which companies want to come here now, has changed. They're not ready to build from scratch. They're ready to see a building they're ready to move into tomorrow.
We still have a technology. We still have that building.
The impact housing building, it's on the market and it's a commodity right now.
So it is on the market.
Yes, sir. And it's a commodity. There's a lot of interest in that building. Any further discussion, questions, concerns? I appreciate you all, and I know that you took a lot of time in reading this because of some of the things that we had talked about today and the conversations we had last week. This is a tight budget, but there is no tax increase. We believe we have made strides in meeting council's objectives with the primary being, the only position being added is law enforcement.
I think that's good, unique, thinking out of the box way to,
It is. It is.
anybody else, anything else before we close? Motion to adjourn,
Make a motion.
all in favor?
Uh,